These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse.
Breaking news in the so-called House of Horrors case out of Ohio. The parents of 16 children indicted for alleged sex crimes against children. And they're not the only ones facing charges. I'll explain. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Nearly 2 months after state agents discovered 16 children in a home in rural Ohio, their parents have been indicted, and so have other people. Gary Cers Jr. and his wife Elizabeth were taken into custody on June 30th after their children were discovered in a home on Omar Street. Gary Jr.'s parents, Gary Sr. and Christina Cers, were also arrested. All were charged with 16
These
counts of
cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse. That sentence came from a county prosecutor in Ohio. The state did not walk into a home looking for 16 children. It walked in looking for DNA. Then the door opened. Visual anchor: a single search warrant, folded in an officer's hand, becomes a map to a house where 16 children lived behind the silence of Omar Street. They came for DNA, they left with 16 children. Breaking news from Vinton County. Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers, parents of 16 children, have been indicted on sex charges involving minors, sexual battery, unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, 4 felony counts each. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Law and Crime Insiders. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence.
Counts of child endangering and entered not guilty pleas. The elder Cers have now been indicted on felony and misdemeanor counts of child endangering. Elizabeth and Gary Jr. face similar charges and charges involving sex with minors. Here's Vinton County Prosecutor William Archer with the news.
These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse. Law enforcement sought the DNA of Gary Cers Jr. related to the child sex abuse case. Once Cers Jr. was located, search warrants were executed to secure his DNA for genetic testing. Upon serving the search warrants for the child sex abuse case, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Omar Street.
Nearly 2 months after state agents found 16 children in a rural Ohio home, the grand jury has spoken. The grandparents already faced child endangering charges. Now the parents face sexual battery and unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. 4 felony counts each. The indictment says the victim is not a member of their immediate family. That phrase will matter later. Prosecutor William Archer put the sequence on the record. Law enforcement was serving a search warrant to secure Gary Jr.'s DNA in a child sex abuse case. Once that warrant was served, the condition of 16 children on Omar Street became known. Then the prosecutor used a phrase that doesn't appear in the indictment: intrafamily relations. That gap is the crack in the door. They came for DNA. They left with 16 children.
House became known. The child sex abuse cases involve intrafamily relations and do not pose a risk to the general public, and I would also add, does not involve human trafficking. This case all started with diligent Dollar General clerks calling authorities with concerns over children they observed. We asked the public to be mindful of the circumstances around them, especially involving children. We continue to ask for the public's respect for the rights and privacy of the child victims in this case. I'd like to add a thank you to the Vinton County Sheriff's Office and BCI for their investigative efforts, which have been amazing. This case is going to be prosecuted by myself, Kara Keating, Assistant Attorney General, and Annika Collins, Highland County Prosecuting Attorney. Thank you.
The prosecutor said the case started with diligent Dollar General clerks. Not a police raid, not a federal task force. Minimum wage retail workers who noticed something wrong. That is the ticking clock. If a cashier had looked down for 1 more minute, how long would that house have remained a private crime scene? The public was told there is no risk to the general public, but the risk was never outside the house. The prosecution team includes the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit. That combination is not assigned to small cases.
So the prosecutor says this case involves family members. Vinton County Sheriff Ryan Kane elaborated on the investigation and how it started.
A Vinton County grand jury today has issued indictments in 3 criminal cases involving sexual abuse and child endangerment. These charges stem from criminal investigations conducted by the Vinton County Sheriff's Office and the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations, BCI. The cases are being prosecuted by the Vinton County Prosecutor's Office with the assistance from the Highland County Prosecutor's Office and the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit. In December of 2025, at the request of the Vinton County Sheriff's Office, BCI's Special Victims Unit opened an investigation into allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. Information obtained in this investigation prompted BCI in March of 26 to open a second investigation, this one involving allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. On June 30th, authorities executed a search warrant at a residence in Hamden, Ohio, and Vinton County on Omar Street. There have been a lot of speculation and questions regarding the June 30th presence on Omar Street in Hamden.
Vinton County Sheriff Ryan Kane confirmed the timeline. In December 2025, BCI opened an investigation into allegations involving 2 children. That led to a second investigation in March 2026. One concerned family child sex abuse. The other concerned unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. The first investigation did not start at the house. It started with 2 children talking. That means the state had been building a case for 6 months before the public ever heard the words House of Horrors. December to June. 2 children, then a second investigation, then a search warrant, then 16 children. The house was not a sudden discovery. It was the endpoint of a slow-moving investigation.
These indictments provide some insight into the ongoing investigation. However, to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation and to protect the victims, I conclude my statement here. I am thankful for the work of my deputies and our fellow partners at BCI. We will continue to pursue justice in these cases.
The grand jury has indicted Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers on 4 felony charges each, 2 counts of sexual battery and 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. I've learned law enforcement learned of Gary Jr. and Elizabeth during a separate sex abuse investigation that started back in December of 2025. Okay, so to really dig into these breaking new details, I want to bring in Ron O'Brien. He is the former Franklin County prosecutor at Franklin County, surrounds and is part of Columbus, Ohio. So, Ron, thank you so much for coming on. Just first of all, your reaction to both Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers being charged with sex crimes involving minors.
The grand jury indicted Gary Jr. and Elizabeth Cers on 4 felony charges each. 2 counts of sexual battery, 2 counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. The alleged conduct is dated between January and September 2022. That is nearly 4 years before the search warrant. The charges did not come from a single incident. They came from a window of time. Former prosecutor Ron O'Brien noted what seemed surprising. The victims are not named. The indictment says the victim is not immediate family. But the prosecutor called it intrafamily. If the victim is not immediate family, this was not a closed family secret. The phrase "no risk to the general public" starts to fray.
Well, that was somewhat telegraphed, as we talked about the other day, by a statement of the prosecutor from Vinton County in opposing reduction of bond for Elizabeth. And so we knew something was coming. What seems surprising about this, and it is really unclear as to who the alleged victims are, it looks like the indictment or charges against the 2 Cers go back to 2022, the first quarter of 2022, against unnamed victims, but they were related to the investigation of the other 2 people indicted.
O'Brien said the charges were telegraphed. The prosecution had already opposed bond reduction for Elizabeth. You don't oppose bond on child endangering if the investigation is only about living conditions. You oppose bond because you know something worse is coming. The press release is precise. Between January and September 2022, the defendants engaged in sexual conduct with a minor more than 10 years younger than their own age. The victim is not a member of their immediate family. Intrafamily can include extended family or household members. It hides as much as it reveals.
People indicted on sex offenses today. Curiously enough, the press release indicates that the victims were not a member of the immediate family of the Cers, but at the same time, the statement given by the county prosecutor would seem that perhaps they were. So that's something that you and others are going to have to dig into and clarify.
Yeah, we're digging into that for sure and clarifying. And I want to read what the press release says. It says the indictment alleges that between January and September 2022, the defendants engaged in sexual conduct with a minor more than 10 years younger than their...
If the same victims from the first investigation provided information about Gary Jr. and Elizabeth, then the house on Omar Street was not just a place where 16 children lived. It was where at least one alleged victim pointed investigators next. The search warrant was not random. It was the result of a chain of statements that started in December 2025 and ended on June 30th. They came for DNA. They left with 16 children. There was another clue. Gary Jr. had a prior public indecency case. People assumed police went to Omar Street for a minor warrant. O'Brien said no. You don't bring the Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit for an exposure
10 years
case.
Younger than their own age. The victim is not a member of their immediate family. So it said, he said, this says not a member of the immediate family. However, the prosecutor said this was an intrafamily thing. So are we left to believe it's not their own children, but potentially, another child in the family?
And at least since the two investigations were tied, the ones for which the indictment on the sex offenses against the Cers today arose from the investigation of the other two men indicted in the case. It may be that the same victims are involved, and that in the course of the first investigation, the victims relayed
Two men
that
charged in the first investigation, Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson, are key. O'Brien laid out two possibilities. Either those men provided information to prosecutors, or the victims in that case said the Cerses were involved. Either path leads to the same doorstep. The parents were not caught by accident, they were identified. The Dollar General employees complicate the picture. The prosecutor said their concerns contributed to the investigation. When reporters went there, employees refused to talk. That could be corporate policy. It could also be witnesses told not to speak.
Relayed that the Cers also were involved either with the knowledge of the two other men and also indicted today, or whether or not they was a follow-up.
And I've learned that investigation 1, which involves Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson, this is investigation 1 that it began in December of 2025. The information about Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers was developed from that investigation. So that is what led the law enforcement officers initially to that house on June 30th.
Those clerks did something most adults never do. They saw something, they said something. That is the entire difference between a closed case and an open door. The sheriff said the investigation is ongoing. In a child sex abuse case, ongoing means child forensic interviews are still being conducted. It means the state may not be done. The current indictment covers 2022. But abuse of this type is rarely a single season. The question is not whether there are more victims. It is whether prosecutors can charge them. The clock is still running.
30th, people were saying, oh, it's because they went there for a public indecency warrant for Gary Jr. I think you and I knew the whole time, and I've been saying the whole time, no, they didn't go there with a search warrant for a public indecency case. This was going to be much more serious.
Yeah, and I think we both kind of concluded that at the time, based on the conduct of the investigators, you don't have the Ohio Attorney General down in Vinton County for a warrant on a exposing case. And it's interesting how that exposing case may tie in with these subsequent charges. The only thing I can try
The public asks why this was allowed to happen. The case file suggests a pattern: concerns, investigations, a search warrant, and only then an indictment. The system worked, but it worked slowly. 6 months from first investigation to search, another 2 months to indictment. That is due process. But for the children inside that house, due process can feel like abandonment. O'Brien said if prosecutors had enough evidence of intrafamily sexual misconduct inside the home, they would have included it now. They didn't. That means either the evidence isn't there, or the children are still being interviewed.
I can try and extrapolate from this is either the two men that are charged in the case as well are providing information to the prosecutor and the attorney general that led them to the Cers, or alternatively the victims in that case provided information that the two men not only perped on them, but that the Cers were involved in sexual misconduct with them. Either of those options would tell me is likely as to how they got on the doorstep of the Cers with the search warrant this summer.
In Ohio, prosecutors can file a superseding indictment. New charges, new victims added later. This indictment may be the first layer. Ongoing investigation should keep everyone from declaring this closed. The prosecutor has told commissioners they are seeking permanent custody of the 16 children. That is not punishment, it is legal severing. If the parents are convicted of sex crimes, that custody petition becomes almost automatic. The children may never return to Omar Street. But permanent custody is a slow process. It will move through hearings, case plans, and appeals.
And, we still have pieces of this puzzle that we are assembling. One thing that really piqued my interest was that William Archer, the Vinton County prosecutor, said that alert Dollar General employees contacted law enforcement about their concerns about some of the children that they saw with Gary Jr. and Elizabeth Siders. They were very concerned. And so it seems like potentially we may have had a couple of different things going on here. We have Dollar General employees, and then we also have this investigation one where information is gathered and gleaned about the couple. And all of that was enough to potentially get this search warrant for the house on June 30th.
Yes, and at least it's probably the addition of all that kind of information, potentially from co-defendants, victims on the first case, and the children may
The elder
have.
Cerses are a separate problem. Gary Sr. is 73 and out on a signature bond with a GPS bracelet. The prosecutor said he is not a threat to the public. The grandparents face 2 counts of second-degree felony child endangering, 10 counts of third-degree felony child endangering, and 7 misdemeanor counts. No sex charges. That absence tells a story. The state is not saying they committed sexual abuse. It is saying they allowed children to live in conditions that endangered
The
them.
children may have said something at the Dollar General to an employee there that piqued their interest and passed it on to law enforcement. And then they were already looking into the matters the other 2 men and the Siders had been involved in going back. That's 4 years that the alleged misconduct in that case is alleged to occurred.
What's very interesting to me about this, Ron, I went down to Vinton County, and employees at the Dollar General said to me, I'm really sorry. I can't talk to you. I can't talk to you. And I thought maybe it was a corporate thing. Corporate came down on them and said, no, we don't do that. Because a lot of times when you're dealing with these big chains, you have to go through, the corporate media relations office and things of that
Their
nature.
attorneys have raised competency. The case against the grandparents may stall before trial. But the child endangering charges tell a story about the house itself. 16 children, multiple adults, a home state agents considered so concerning that they removed every child. The grandparents were not charged with sex crimes. Some people abused. Some people failed to stop it. That distinction matters in court and to the public.
Things of that nature. And now I'm wondering, were these the people that potentially called in to law enforcement?
And that well could be the case, and the law enforcement personnel would have told them not to talk to anybody such as yourself or others.
These allegations involving Gary Jr. and Elizabeth, as you stated, go back years. But as we know, things like this, it doesn't seem like it's usually a one and done. So the sheriff said that this investigation is ongoing. And we know from the Vinton County prosecutor telling the commissioners we're seeking permanent custody of the children, that's going to happen, and they will more than likely be successful in obtaining permanent.
The sheriff returned to the official narrative: 3 criminal cases, sexual abuse and child endangerment, 2 investigations, 1 search warrant, 16 children. He said the indictments provide some insight, but he would say no more. That is not secrecy. It is how you protect a live case. But it also means the public is seeing only the part of the file that has been charged. The rest is still with social workers, victim advocates, and the grand jury.
Permanent custody of the children, especially if there's a conviction on a sex crime. So I'm thinking to myself, if this investigation is ongoing, is there going to be more there? Are we going to see potentially more indictments?
Well, at least if they thought they had enough on inter-family sexual misconduct, I would have included it in the indictment today. And so either they don't have enough because it wasn't going on inside the family home, or the children are still in the process of being interviewed, going through social workers and psychological treatment and testing, and they may not want to proceed at this point. They can always, as you know, produce a superseding indictment with new
charges. The prosecutor's timeline is the spine. The case began with family child sex abuse. Law enforcement sought Gary Jr.'s DNA. The search warrant led to the discovery of 16 children. Then he added the line that has been repeated without scrutiny: the cases involve intrafamily relations and do not pose a risk to the general public. But every one of those 16 children was part of the general public. The risk was never to strangers. It was already inside the house.
New charges, new victims after they're arraigned on this indictment and while it's pending.
Ron, let's move on now to the elder Siders. Gary Siders Sr. is 73 years old. He's out on a signature bond wearing a GPS bracelet. When he was released on that signature bond because of his serious medical issues, the Vinton County prosecutor said, look, he's not a threat to the public. But he and his wife, Christina, the grandparents, have now been indicted. They're facing 2 counts of child endangering felonies in the 2nd degree, 10 counts of endangering children, felonies of the 3rd degree, and then 7 counts of endangering children. Those are misdemeanors. They are not charged with any sex crimes. So how do you see
the state credits Dollar General clerks for starting this? That detail should make everyone pause. A retail employee saw enough in a brief transaction to call law enforcement. That means the signs were not hidden. They were observable. The house was not a sealed vault. It was a place where children came to a public store and someone noticed. The question is not why those clerks acted. It is who else saw the same children and said nothing.
Their cases ending up because, I mean, they're challenging their competency, or at least their lawyers are saying they may not be competent to stand trial. However, they have not been charged with any sex crimes.
Yes, it's interesting that the elder Siders were not indicted on any sex offenses, either within the family or outside the family. They are just facing the multiple endangering children charges that range from a misdemeanor up to the 2nd degree felony. So what we can conclude from that is apparently they don't have enough evidence now to proceed on sex offenses inside that home, or alternatively, they never occurred.
Now that was
Gary Sr. and Christina Cers were not indicted on sex offenses. That tells us the state's theory is not that everyone participated. It is that some abused and some failed to stop it. The elder Cerses are charged with child endangering, not sex abuse. That distinction matters because it separates the alleged predators from the alleged bystanders. In a house with 16 children, that line will define every defense argument from here on.
Now that was former Franklin County prosecutor Ron O'Brien with some analysis for us. Let's watch one more time what the Vinton County prosecutor and the sheriff had to say about this investigation.
A Vinton County grand jury today has issued indictments in 3 criminal cases involving sexual abuse and child endangerment. These charges stem from criminal investigations conducted by the Vinton County Sheriff's Office and the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations, BCI. The cases are being prosecuted by the Vinton County Prosecutor's Office with the assistance from the Highland County Prosecutor's Office and the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit. In December of 2025, at the request of the Vinton County Sheriff's Office, BCI's Special Victims Unit opened an investigation into allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. Information
The sheriff's full statement repeats one phrase to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation. I conclude my statement here. That is not a dodge. In multi-victim cases, premature disclosure can contaminate interviews. But it also means the public is being asked to trust a process that has already produced one house of horrors. The indictments provide some insight. They do not provide the whole picture. The gap between what is charged and what is still being investigated is where the next 6 months will happen.
Information obtained in this investigation prompted BCI in March of 26 to open a second investigation, this one involving allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. On June 30th, authorities executed a search warrant at a residence in Hamden, Ohio, and Vinton County on Omar Street. There have been a lot of speculation and questions regarding the June 30th presence on Omar Street in Hamden. These indictments provide some insight into the ongoing investigation. However, to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation and to protect the victims, I conclude my statement here. I am thankful for the work of my deputies and our fellow partners at BCI. We will continue to pursue justice in these cases.
These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse. Law enforcement sought the DNA of Gary Siders Jr. related to the child sex abuse case.
The prosecutor said the case does not involve human trafficking. That was likely aimed at a rumor that traveled faster than the facts. But it also narrows the legal theory. These are family child sex abuse cases, not commercial exploitation cases. That distinction matters. It means the victims and the accused may share a history, a home, or a bloodline. It does not make the abuse less severe. It makes it more difficult to detect. That is why the Dollar General detail matters so much.
Once Siders Jr. was located, search warrants were executed to secure his DNA for genetic testing. Upon serving the search warrants for the child sex abuse case, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Omar Street house became known. The child sex abuse cases involve intrafamily relations and do not pose a risk to the general public, and I would also add, does not involve human trafficking. This case all started with diligent Dollar General clerks calling authorities with concerns over children they observed. We asked the public to be mindful of the circumstances around them, especially involving children. We continue to ask for the public's respect for the rights and privacy of the child victims in this case. I'd like to add a thank you to the Vinton County.
Here is your call to research. Go to the Vinton County Clerk of Court's website and pull the indictment in State of Ohio v. Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers. Read the charge language yourself. Then answer one question in the comments. Why does the indictment say the victim is not a member of the immediate family while the prosecutor calls the case intrafamily? That is how you tell whether the public narrative matches the legal record. If you want more breakdowns like this, like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications for law and crime in Cedars. We follow the evidence, not the headline.